Hey everybody, welcome to the Tuesday night edition of Class. Glad to have you here with us. We're about to put another one in the books. We've got over 25 videos out there, 4,500 views of all of those topics, and we appreciate you guys keep coming up to come here and say hi to us. We're going to talk about SSD. We have the vice chairman of the committee to, well, my left, depending on where he may be on your screen. And he looks like he's in a lot better weather and a nice, better place than I am right now, which is very nice. Happy about that. Remember, if you have any questions about whatever is going on today, I'm going to turn the chat over to me. Any questions as he's talking, feel free to put them in. I'll catalog them, and then we'll attack them with them at the end of the program. Other than that, as I mentioned, this gentleman is the vice chair. He's been calling for 20 years, Royal Records recording artist as well, and he's got the singing family to back him up. So, ladies and gentlemen, a nice virtual round of applause for Mr. Noah Siegmann. I'll talk to you at the end, sir. Good luck.
And the crowd goes wild. Thanks, Ted. It is absolutely good to be here for sure. Thank you for asking me to come. Tonight's topic is something that's near and dear to my heart. Coming from a square dancing family, especially, I learned how to dance in 1998, but a lot of people don't know that my grandpa actually started dancing in 1970. And he began calling in 1974, and he called from 74 till around 2012, I believe. He passed away in 2017, but my dad was a caller for a while, and when I was 10 years old, I learned how to dance and started calling when I was about 12, 13, right around there. And that's kind of my story, where it went from there. So it was an interesting cycle to go through, especially since I didn't know anything that had happened before. So to me, this was it. 1998 was the year I learned how to dance. To me, there was a ton of dancing activities and a ton of dancing going on. And as I started calling and I started meeting other callers and learning what history used to be like in the 70s and in the 80s, it was very interesting because it kind of brought to light a whole new world that I never knew existed. And I started investigating a little more and talking to more people, and it was concerning. And I thought, wow, it's come a long way. It's fallen a long way. So I would like to think that everybody on this Zoom tonight, I would like to think that we're all in the same boat as far as wanting to preserve something that we all enjoy. Square dancing is amazing. It's a unique thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for your family, for your friends. And it's been a valuable part of this country's history, as well as the world. As we all know, I'm sure we have people tuning in from all over the place. So I'm glad that we're all here together. It's going to be fun. I'm not going to take super long because it's a pretty simple concept. I'm happy to be out here in southeastern Wisconsin. I'm in my backyard. You can see the organic cornfield right behind me. Nowhere I'd rather be than the country. So the kids are running around playing in the sandbox, and life is good. So we're here to talk about SSD. It was called Sustainable Square Dancing. We've changed the name to Social Square Dancing. There's a reason for that. But we could probably talk for days, and all of us probably on this Zoom have spoken for hours and hours with lots of different people on, why is square dancing going down? What's happening? What are the problems? And we can do that, but we never have solutions. Did you ever notice where you'll talk and everyone agrees this is the problem, that's the problem, and they'll blame a number of reasons for why it's going down, but there never is really a great game plan to then make a difference. And we need leadership. We need people to kind of step up and be willing to do some things a little bit different than what we've been doing. And I learned something. I learned that before we had what we call the escalator of levels in square dancing, I learned that there was basically square dancing. And the list of calls that people would learn was much shorter. And then they could dance at an earlier level and enjoy it and have fun right away. And then recruit their friends to come on in and have the same fun that they were explaining. When I learned how to dance, I didn't know anything different. We learned mainstream right off the bat. And then we learned plus too right away, because we were looking around seeing, mainstream is great, but we have to sit out 2 tips in Wisconsin. How we had it back when I learned how to dance is a mainstream club would have a dance with about 7 tips, with rounds between. And then you'd have 1 to 2 plus tips every night. And we'd have to sit on the sideline watching all the people dancing something we didn't know. So of course, the attraction was great to learn those extra 29 calls, which is what it was. So we did. And, we were willing to do that. Interestingly enough, the levels and the escalator that was put into place is one of the main reasons we started losing our activity in the numbers. And there are a number of reasons for that. But there's a couple things that I'm just going to present to you all tonight to start thinking about. Some of you maybe have been calling or dancing. I know we've got callers on here. I know we have dancers on here. So some of you were around before this all occurred. Some of you are around after. I was after. But I've spoken to enough people who verified how it used to be, and they saw the shift happen where we started changing things around. So just imagine with me, if you have people coming into an activity, if you want to grow something, like right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a shutdown where we've never experienced before ever in our history of the square dancing world that I'm aware of. And I'm not convinced that things are just going to pop back up to the way they are. I think we all know we're going to lose a large number of our dancing population. And we have to do something where when the time comes and people start opening up again and dancing and the clubs start reorganizing and coming back and the callers are doing their thing, I don't think anyone, and I'm going out on a limb, but I haven't talked to anyone who thought square dancing was healthy or growing in the last 20 years. So I don't think the jury's out anymore on what doesn't work. So the reason we're excited for SSD, the reason I agreed to join the committee, even be the vice chair, is because I'd like to be helping make some of those positive changes. And if you're on here right now and you're thinking like, what can I do to start this in my area to actually see if it works? The concept works and it's wonderful. However, we need some people to make some changes. So there's a few reasons why SSD works. And we're going to, at the end of this Zoom, I'm going to give you a couple places to go where you can learn more about it. We've got an amazing private Facebook group where conversations are occurring. We've got some documents being taught. SSD, social square dancing, is not just a shorter list of calls, okay? Because if we just wanted a shorter list of calls, we could use basic, for example. But what's interesting is, like when I learned, I didn't even know there was, I'm just being honest, when I learned how to dance, I didn't even know there was a basic list. I thought there was mainstream and plus. And then my mind was blown when I found out there was advanced 1 and 2 and then challenge all the way up to challenge 4. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And what's happening is I didn't even want to learn up to that high. But what happened is we gave our callers so many calls and we started teaching so many moves to dancers that we never got them dancing. And there are places throughout this country. Now, I've never been to Europe, so I don't know how it is over there. I've spoken to people who are from over there. They've, verified things for me. Things are definitely different in Europe. But in over here, interestingly enough, there are places that take dancers from first night of lessons all the way through plus without stopping because they have plus clubs that are running in their area. And I just don't think that's something people as a whole are really interested in doing. We've got to have people be able to have fun sooner. Teaching mode versus dancing mode, two very separate things. And I remember learning wasn't necessarily that much fun. Now, if you have a good caller, a skilled caller who can make learning fun, it's a little bit different. But imagine, are you really dancing if you're continually being explained or things are being explained to you on what to do? The caller is telling you, walking you through the moves. It's continually stop and go. And you never get a chance to just feel that wind in your face, the exhilaration of finding your corner on the other end of the hall and doing an Alaman left and shouting and right and left granted and promenading home. You don't do that. And so we're teaching people all these calls, almost a year of lessons of teaching mode, and it's killing their enthusiasm because they came to have fun. And the reason we change it to social square dancing is because we need to package this in a way where people, once this pandemic starts settling down and we get everything under control, people are looking for something to do. And I don't know about you all on this Zoom tonight, but all the people that I've been coming into contact with over the last few weeks to a month to 2 months, they miss the human connection that they had, not just square dancers. People are going to definitely be looking for something to do. And if we can take advantage of this rare opportunity in this rare window, I really think we can make something great happen here. So what we need to do, and what we're doing, is we've taken SSD. It's a complete structure. It's a whole system. It's not just a shorter list of calls. Okay, we want to be clear about that. We do have a shorter list of calls, but we're not here to be just another program in Caller Lab, for example. There's a difference between, like, basic, for example. That's considered a stepping stone in today's society, in the square dancing world. But SSD is a destination program where once you learn those 50 calls, you can dance for the rest of your life at those 50 calls. And you never have to feel pressure to move on, because we're not saying, look, the cool kids are over there doing, plus or mainstream or advanced. And there's nothing wrong with those other levels. But when you start mixing it together, you lose the specialness and the spontaneity of, hey, we learned how to square dance. Well, what level do you dance? And I remember when that happened to me, and I went to my first convention, and I couldn't go to about 3 or 4 of the halls because those were the people that had learned much more than I even knew. And I felt kind of like someone had poured a little bit of cold water over my head. Like, I was so pumped about square dancing, but I can only dance in these 2 halls over here. I can't dance in those 3. And we don't want to be segregating people the way we have been for now. I can't believe it. For now, I don't know, Ted or Tony, you're on here. I don't remember exactly what year that they started adding some of those levels, but I know it was in the 80s for sure, if not in the 70s. I should have that memorized, but you guys can verify that. So that means we're going on 30, 40 years. How has it worked out? I'm not sure segregation is a good idea if we want to have a community program. So what we're doing is we're taking the barrier of entry for people and we're lowering it, where already when you have your first night of lessons, you already can see the end of the tunnel where you're a graduated dancer and you can let it rip. Because this program was designed to be taught in between 18 to 22 hours of class time. That's amazing. So we'd love to see it getting done in 10, 12 weeks, but it can take a little longer than that. It's okay. Here's the beauty of this, though. If you can hold multiple classes per year, imagine if you learn how to dance and all of a sudden you're super excited. You graduate from a normal, let's say a mainstream class. What is that, around 20 weeks or so-ish? I think that's generally how long it takes people. Well, after 20 weeks, you're so excited about it because you made it through. You made it. You're one of that small percentage of people that didn't quit, that didn't disappear. You made it through, and you're telling your friends about it. And here you are, lessons started. You're telling your friends about it, and then they're saying, well, we maybe want to try that. Can we learn? And you say, well, the next set of lessons start next year. So we only have 1 set of lessons per year. How often do you think those other friends are really going to hang around and be that excited to take that next set of lessons that they have to wait 9 months for? Like, that's crazy. We've got to have more doorways where we can be inserting those new people who are being told. We all know the vast majority of square dancers learned because they were brought by someone they knew, that they loved, that they trusted, that they enjoyed spending time with. And that person brought them in and said, this is so much fun, you got to try it. And many times they were dragged in, but you know what? Once they were in, they had fun. So imagine if you had 2 or 3 or even 4 doorways every year where you could start a new class and you had these classes always going. That's an amazing opportunity to always have people being able to come in. So we're lowering that barrier of entry so we can appeal to a broader audience, just like it used to be before we created the escalator of levels. And I just want to stress something here. Some people don't like to talk about it or hear it. It can get a little uncomfortable. But, when I joined the square dancing community, I kind of joined that flawed system, not knowing there was anything different. And then I saw it happen before my eyes. I saw people that I had taught myself get burned out because they learned basic, mainstream, and plus. And because they were so bored at those levels going to the local dances, and this falls on the callers too. I think most of us are callers on this Zoom. That's another topic for another day. However, those added calls, we weren't even using the ones we had adequately. There's a lot to be said for smooth, symmetrical choreography with a lesser number of calls that can be very interesting. But all of a sudden, we get these fancy calls. We get, relay the deucey or load the boat. And we start calling plain vanilla from A all the way, or from, I should say, basic all the way to advanced and even challenge. And people were getting bored. So they thought they had to learn the next level. And so part of that falls on the callers as well. I'll even take some of the blame for it because that's a system I was, born into. And I cut my teeth on that, not knowing there was anything different. The system of SSD, some of the documents we put together, we're so excited to share with everybody. We've been working the last two plus years in the committee to create a complete document, a teaching document, for example. So if you're a caller tonight, you're thinking, I'd love to get an SSD group going. How do I do that? How do I make sure I can be an entertainer to my dancers with lesser calls? We've got you covered. We've got a lesson plan that's complete. We've got examples you can use. We've got modules, singing call figures. We want to get people dancing as soon as possible. And that's the beauty of this plan. So I'm just going over a few things I wanted to make sure I covered. We want to make sure that people understand there is a place for the other levels. So we're not saying they cannot exist or they cannot coexist, but we need to understand that you have to have a safe place for your dancers to dance without feeling like they have to attain something more. And that peer pressure is very strong. I remember it myself, and it was a little bit of I felt a little crestfallen, I guess, when I achieved mainstream. To me, that was a big deal as a new dancer. And I remember feeling like, oh, wow, we can't actually dance at some of these dances because, every fifth Wednesday, this club only does a plus dance. But the caller they have coming in is an amazing guy, but we can't even go. I felt completely left out. And I started feeling that pressure. So we had to learn plus if we wanted to dance every tip of the night. And that kind of stuff we want to avoid. And so as callers, we have to understand that all of these moves we have at our disposal, like we've got a tool belt with all these moves, hundreds of moves, right? How well, examine yourself, and I'm doing the same for myself. How well do we really know the calls we even have? When you go to a convention and you walk into the mainstream or the plus hall, are you really hearing, are they even using all the calls they have? 9 times out of 10, they're not. And I'm guilty of this as well. You learn and you think you're okay, and we stopped working on our craft. So part of this is going to come down to us as callers pointing our fingers at ourselves saying, it's time for us to get dirty. We got to get in the trench. We got to do something about this. And we're going to have to start understanding what we're actually doing and start broadening our skills and our knowledge base. Start working on things like, these videos you're putting out, Ted. It's amazing. Like some of the content that you have that's free training, those are things people pay big dollars for at caller schools and seminars that are days long. And you all have those free to you. I think I saw one, Tony did one on showmanship that I'm sure was excellent. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I saw the topics and I thought, here you go. Everybody, this is free. And so as callers, we have to make sure we're providing fun for people right away. Okay? We cannot wait until they graduate. Otherwise, what's the point? If they're like, man, this square dancing thing is crazy. I'm going to be learning for the next year. How many people are going to stick around for that? We don't want that pressure. So there are issues and topics that can come up, around the topic we're talking about that I'm not going to go into everything tonight because we've had a lot of discussions. We'll see if anyone has questions regarding this in general, absolutely let me know. But we're going to invite you for sure to join our private Facebook group. And if you want to find it, you go to your Facebook and you search for Social Square Dancing. All right, so it's a private group. There's a few questions we ask you if you want to join. We are only letting people in who answer the questions, so we make sure you understand. There's a lot of stuff happening there behind the scenes, a lot of exciting things. Questions and answers are happening there as well. And then you're also going to want to go to the Caller Lab. I think it's the Caller Lab knowledge.org. So the knowledge base. And if you go to colorlabknowledge.org and you search for SSD, you'll find the document that describes a lot of what we're doing. And here's what we're doing. So people are saying, why is it so different? We have it set up where we have standard application, which means basics. You know, at the bottom of the Caller Lab list right now, you can read it. It talks about the moves in mainstream and plus, and it says these moves should be taught from, I think, multiple definitions, and they should be danced for, I think, at least a year before people move on to the next level. Well, folks, who's doing that? Number one, if you are teaching all these moves from multiple positions and formations and arrangements, it's taking you way too long. And you have to be a computer technician to understand some of this stuff. And it takes out the fun of it for many people. Some people like the problem-solving aspect, absolutely. But the majority of people coming into our activity are not looking for brain benders. They're looking for fun, where they can get out, forget the troubles of their life, and come and dance. So we've got standard application. That's what we teach in our 18 to 22 hours of class time. Thanks, Ted. I see you put that up on the chat. He put on the Caller Lab knowledge base. So we teach standard application dancing. From basically one position, we get them dancing right away. Learn the regular ones, and we have it set in a way where the moves are in an order that makes a lot of sense. And we've taken out some of the moves that maybe aren't as popular, and we want it to be as fun as possible. And then after this standard application class, guess what? You have dances that are going on every week or every other week. And at these dances, you're going to start introducing tweaks to those standard applications. And it's really cool. It's a little bit of a variety. So we'll add in, you know, a lot of people think that it's really tough to do something that's just basically the opposite of what you just did. And what we want to create, and this is going to be on callers now, okay? I'm talking to you callers, myself included. We need to create symmetry in our choreography, in our patter, in our singing calls, where people do it this way and then they do it this way, like a figure eight. And so many dances I've been to, I was blessed to have some very great coaches. You know, Tony, you were a coach at my first caller college. Jerry Story was as well. Deborah Carroll Jones and John Jones. That was my first caller college, right? So I think we could all agree there's some outstanding talent and, you know, legends that helped me start learning. And something they talked about was, are you using counterclockwise rotation? Like going over to the left instead of always to the right. And I started thinking about it. It's like a simple example would be a flutter wheel to a reverse flutter wheel. That's a beautiful motion. And how many times are you taking people both directions? That's an example of symmetry. So the document that we have put together it's loaded. And we've got a bunch of people on our committee, and we had a ton of people contribute to this. You know, if you'd see the string of emails, oh my goodness, you know, over the last 2 years, I think I got a notification from Gmail saying that I either had to upgrade to add more space because I was taking up too much. And I looked, and it's like all the committee, you know, conversations that we've been having to tweak things to make it better, continually making it better, easier to understand, and more importantly, easier to implement. So what we want to have is a very simple system that's plug and play, where you as a caller, even if you haven't had a ton of experience, can feel confident that if you start a set of lessons tomorrow, we've got your back. You're not doing it you're not doing it alone, and you're going to be able to have a teaching guide that's going to help you every step of the way, from day one till graduation and beyond. So here's how this looks. You have your lessons going on let's just say every 12 weeks, okay? And in the meantime, you've got your dances going on either every week or every other week, where you're starting to introduce this symmetrical choreography. It's not hard stuff, just symmetrical, where you're doing both body flows. We're having people identify that. We're getting them dancing. The timing's going to be good. We got to make sure they're moving, having fun. And then we even have, for the people that really want a little bit of a challenge, we've got some extended application choreography that's all been vetted out and scrubbed for you, all available in this document. And those are the things that some people like that challenge. I think we all know. that's for them. So we have something for everyone, but within the SSD list. So that's what it really looks like. And what we're going to do is create a community of people where they can learn social square dancing in Southern Iowa. And then when they're on vacation in Massachusetts, they can stop in at an SSD dance or a social square dance up there, and they can dance everything, knowing immediately, like a network, right? Doing all the same things. And that's what we want to do, is create that where everybody's doing the same things. So it's not like, oh, what level of dance does this club call? Or does this club dance at? And you shouldn't have to ask those questions. So we also believe that people, if you want to teach some calls, back years ago, Tony, if you're on here, actually, I'd love to get your opinion on this. When it comes to disposable calls, back years ago, I think probably, I'm not going to put a year on it, but there was a time when there would be like quarterly selections that came out. And you would have special calls that were presented saying, hey, here's a special call for this quarter. And it would be something very unique. And you'd come into a class. Tony, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. I mean, do you remember when that was going on?
I'll tell you what's funny about that, is that last week when I called you, remember last week or the week before, and shortly that same evening, I called Doran McBroom just because I was just thinking about it, and because he was the chairman of the quarterly selection committee, and I was talking to him about it. It was a very viable committee for a long time, because what happened for many, many years, you come to my dance, I'm workshopping one call, you go down to Jack Platty's area, he's workshopping a different call, and those quarterly selections gave us all the callers something to work that was similar everywhere. So everywhere you went, somebody should have theoretically been working that. And in paper, it sounded great. It didn't work because everybody didn't adhere to it. But on paper, it was a really, really good idea. All of us use the quarterly selections because back in the day, when Jerry and I and all these were traveling everywhere, third tip was always the workshop tip. You always had to have some new call every time you came in an area. You had to have a brand new call that nobody was working. That was what a traveling caller did. Well, this quarterly selection thing now made everybody kind of like a traveling caller. It should have helped everybody on paper.
Got it. Yeah. So you were coming in and you were basically using it for one night, maybe a couple of weeks at the most, and then you'd be done with it, right?
Yeah, it was a great floor leveler. If you needed something to teach one night that nobody knew, this way everybody was teaching the same thing. That was the concept behind it.
Yep, and you got it. And so the reason we wanted this list, the SSD and the Caller Lab, is so we can take a move from mainstream or even plus, have fun with it, teach it for a fun night, and then
you don't need to remember.
Nope,
That's the cool
that's
thing.
right.
About it. Yeah.
Put it away when you're done. So Tony, when you see this whole system that we're talking about, why do you think this will work like it did? I mean, this is really not very different from what used to be. Would you agree?
You're missing in the background while you're doing all of this. There's about a half a dozen of us carrying on a chat on the telephone, talking about this exact same thing. When I started dancing in 1974, there were 50 basics and 25 extended basics. And you graduated at 50 basics. And that 50 basics looks a lot like what would have been our basic list now, pretty much.
Sure.
And then you had the 25, then you had 25 other calls. Most of the clubs danced these 75 calls. Everything else was advanced in South Carolina. There were this was before plus, there was no plus. There was club level, and then there was everything else. This smacks of that. And square dancing was rocking and rolling back in those days because you could teach people in less than 20 weeks. I graduated in 12 weeks.
Yep.
And you could teach multiple sets of lessons in a year if you wanted to. Most clubs didn't. They still just did lessons in September, but you didn't spend the whole year in lessons.
Right. So they were dancing sooner.
Yeah. And this is before the advent of sight calling too. So a lot of the material was modular. Callers read a lot of the stuff, or it was memorized. And so there was a lot of, just what you said earlier, there was just a ton of flow calls. Everything flowed.
Mm-hmm. So that's beautiful. And so we want to go back to that. I don't know why, we made some changes, and I guess that's not a conversation for tonight, but the changes didn't work out too well in the long run, because here we are 50 years later, right? 40 years later, and whatever it is. And it's horrendous, where we're at right now. So we definitely need to make some adjustments. Is everyone going to accept it? I hope so, because we're not taking square dancing away. We actually want it to grow. That's why we're doing this. And the support has been incredible from all over the place. People saying, we see value in this now. And how do we get it going in our own area? And that's another topic we don't have to cover tonight. We actually have a beautiful frequently asked questions document that's just almost ready to release. We're just doing the final edits on it. We're going to get that out to people. And that's going to be something that goes down everything you're probably wondering right now, like, what about this? What about that? It's all being taught there. But most importantly, what we want to do is take these precious new dancers that really are the lifeblood for your activity, and we want to take those people and not put them on that escalator where they learn basic, they learn mainstream, they learn plus, advanced, up to challenge, sometimes nonstop. I do know some people that went nonstop, which is unbelievable. We just want them to be able to dance. And then if they do want to learn those other levels, they're welcome to do so, but they're going to dance at the SSD level for at least a year. That's what we're talking about right here. And it's easy as callers. I know how it was when I first learned plus. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I've got some really cool calls I can call. But because they were cool calls, I never thought about them in an extended application way, Tony. I thought that, Relay the Deucey was cool. You just call it standard. And it seems like it's fun. But that's plain vanilla. That gets old after a while. So I'm excited to see how many people are kind of gathering around and supporting this. We're definitely going to have more and more resources as time goes on. But here's the thing. We really want, we want you. We want people to be a part of this and to start planning so we can start having these groups popping up as we can, as time goes on here, as things start getting back to normal. Hopefully it happens sooner than later. And I actually think it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun going back to this very simple system, basic system. And, people like you, Tony, you're going to be invaluable to us because you can help train our callers, because the new callers that we also need are going to come from these new dancers. As you remember, I'm a caller because I was a dancer first, and I immediately loved calling. And there you go. And it was probably similar to you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I think you'll find that most of the caller schools now, we're designing our schools around new callers and how to work with fewer number of calls.
Yep.
It's a big saying amongst the caller coaches, at least our schools, that any idiot can call plus. That's just so much easier. It takes a really good caller to take a fewer number of calls and make an interesting dance of it. It's a challenge to even callers have been calling for 30, 40, 50 years to come back now and forget about all the deuces and the boats and the gears and try to work with those limited number of calls and put those together in a smooth fashion that makes it flow, makes them dance. And it gets rid of that stop and go stuff that we've been trying to sell for the last 40 years. That to me is what's really, really hurt the activities. You got callers that are making a living with this stop and go stuff. And it just slays me sometimes.
Yep. Well, and hey, back in the day, you could start calling. It's not like you have to graduate a caller school to get bookings. No,
you're right. You're right.
and I think that's probably okay. But at the same time, that's why we do have a challenge, because there's not like a level you have to attain. So, okay, guaranteed, you, Tony, now that you graduated, you will be able to entertain a floor of dancers good enough to get started. So congratulations. Here's your first booking. No, it's like, I want to be a caller. All right, start calling. Have fun. Like, wait, what do I do? We don't want that to happen. We want to have a framework in place where a dancer can say, I think this calling seems like fun. How do I try it? You know what? Something tells me we're going to have virtual caller schools going on all over the place, especially before our numbers are big enough. And that's a whole other thing we're looking forward to. But right now, if you're a dancer on here, there are ways you can get involved. If you're a caller as well, we love hearing feedback. But we're excited about the whole thing. So I think I gave an overview. We're at 35 minutes, I think. So, Ted, do we have any questions or anything like that, or something you think I should cover?
I've got a few. Of course, as a couple more keep coming in, but as they're talking about your frequently asked questions, I have a feeling that you're going to get some of that stuff that's there. So let me see, what do we got here? The general, the kind of theme that I'm getting here is not so much that you need to sell the callers in question, because I think a lot of callers are in that ballpark. it's the selling of the dancer run clubs and the way that, like, I'm assuming the document or the frequently asked questions is what are some ways that you guys have come up with to try to work with that? Because there's some guys that have tried to do the SSD lines and they've been replaced by people who won't, who will go back and call the normal stuff. So what do we do with that?
Yeah, that's probably the most common thing that is presented to us, Ted. So my answer to that is there's a good chance that your dancer run clubs aren't going to be on board, because look, we all know everyone loves change, right? Hey, even though it's not working, we're comfortable with the way things are. So, if you're not going to call what we want you to call, you can't be our club caller anymore, right? And so I'm just going, I have a feeling, Tony, you can tell me what you think, but I have a feeling we're going to be going back to a lot of caller run clubs there were a lot of those back in the day, right?
Well, I had most of the successful, I can't say most, there's a lot of successful clubs that I know of that are caller run, because people just want to come and dance. They don't want to do the decorations. They don't want to do the refreshments. They just want to be able to come and have a good time. And I think that's what we're missing. And I think, you hit it on it really, really strong early on, that this program is designed to run beside the other programs. It's not a replacement.
Right.
It runs alongside them. Now, I would hazard a guess and say that if it were my druthers, this would probably take over, and we see the others go away. If I had my druthers, if I ran square dancing, that's what I would do. I think you would probably do the same thing, because it would make us become better callers. It's too easy now to call if you've got so many of these calls to use.
Well, would you agree though that there's so much you can do even with the shorter list of calls, but we just haven't? I mean, you and Ted, you guys are brilliant callers. Even someone like me, like when I start and I study a little bit, I think this is amazing. Like what I can do with 2 or 3 of these calls that I just maybe don't use very often, by changing a little bit, it's a whole new experience. And that's why I don't want callers to be scared or have trepidation about actually accepting this and using it. You can have I've done dances before where just for fun, I stuck to the SSD list, and it's a mainstream dance. I stuck to the SSD list and I didn't tell anybody, and nobody noticed. It was pretty funny.
I can't tell you the number of plus dances that I've done over the last several years that I've never used any of the plus calls.
Yeah, I know, me too. It's always
So that's a good indicator that it's going to be on us callers to make that entertaining. We need to lower the bar for the dancers, but we need to raise the bar for the callers.
Well said.
And some of us aren't going to really like hearing that, because that means I got to go back to work. Yep. You want to be a square dance caller? That's a privilege. And that's something you're going to have to work at a little bit, just like anything else. And by the way, square dance calling is a position of leadership. And last I checked, that's not just given to people. You got to earn it. So let's look at it that way. What else in life do you do without schooling and you're allowed to, present or participate at the highest levels? Not much that I can think of.
No,
so why is this any different? I think it's time to start adjusting that a little bit, and it will make us all better. So there's a roundabout answer, but it's going to be up to every individual group is different. We've noticed that throughout the country. I can only speak for the U.S. right now. So throughout the country, certain areas are more receptive to it than others. There's a lot of plus clubs that exist that don't like this concept because they're realizing that, how's that going to work? Well, you're right. But how is what you're doing working? That's my question. How many people did you graduate in your class last year? Around here in Wisconsin, at a plus class, they'll graduate 2 or 3 people, and they're like excited about that. You guys, that's horrible. There should be at least a 0 on that number at the very least, because that's what it used to be. So there you go. Ted, what's next?
I'm wondering how much more we want to get into this, because a lot of this is going to be speculation and opinion. There's nothing really specific about the list. I think that some people need to get in there and take a look at it. And I think similar to anything else, there's going to be arguments. I mean, you'd like to see one, I'm sure, that didn't make it. I wouldn't want one on there that is. Regardless of who you talk to, every caller's going to have their own list or their own particular nuances that they'd like to go. So as I'm looking at the questions that are coming in, a lot of them are along, again, the same subject. Like, how are we supposed to do this? Will there be caller run clubs? It's hard to say. This may be something that you take from this aspect and take it down to your local organizations and say, okay, like
Yep.
maybe you're trying to impact nationally. And then I think each one of us need to take that and go to a local program and say, all right, guys, how do we band together? Because it's got to be this unit of the local area that says we're all going to say we're not going to do mainstream plus dances anymore. We all have to say that. And
Right.
then if we all say it, they'll do what we ask because they won't have a choice. But if one of us says they'll do it the other way, that makes it tough. But
Yep.
From here, there you had mentioned early on about keeping in. That's a good one. We'll do that one afterwards. About keeping the other programs with this program as well.
Yeah.
How do you handle the dancers? Because there's still, in theory, a mainstream dance somewhere or a plus dance somewhere, and how do you keep it from being, or thoughts around trying to keep it from being a stepping stone and going into just being a basic program around a mainstream and a plus area?
You mean if there's other clubs in the local area that don't do SSD? Is that what you're saying, Ted?
More or less, yeah. Because I mean, in
Sure.
theory, you go to an SSD dance and then somebody comes at you and goes, "Psst, tomorrow night,
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
teach you blah, blah, blah." You know that shouldn't.
Yeah, and that's going to happen, Ted. And honestly, at this lower level, like at the SSD level, for example, I started a class a couple of years ago that was really good. I think we had probably around 40 people. It was kind of a perfect storm where we had a great class. We only did the 50 calls with them. This is before everything was in place, but I only used those calls, and that's where I stopped. And those people were so loyal to me as the caller because, I raised them like it's like my own children, right? Babies up. And they appreciated what I had sown into them. And I was their constant supporter and encourager. And after they graduated and we were dancing, they didn't even feel the desire to move on. And that's what's very interesting about this. The people that were using it before COVID, they found that a large number of people never had the desire to even move on to mainstream or plus because they were happy at the level they were at. They thought, why should I learn more if I'm enjoying where I'm at now? That's going to be the biggest reason this can work, is because they don't have to feel like the cool kids are dancing mainstream and plus only, but I'm actually kind of a cool kid myself. And look at those mainstream dancers are coming to our dance because it's more fun. I'm hoping that happens. However, there may be a time if it's my own club and I know people are trying to poach dancers and trying to get them to maybe without even realizing it, trying to get them to learn more, and they're not really wanting to do that, I'm not going to be afraid to tell them to stop. Respect what we have going on here, and you're welcome to join us. But the reason I'm here is not to supply you for your next plus club. All right? You need to understand that. So it's going to come down to leadership as well. Sometimes uncomfortable conversations have to occur. But frankly, Ted, I'm not thinking that it's going to be a major problem at this point, because once we get back to dancing, how many are we even going to have left at the current, in the current system? I don't know. So it's going to come down to that, I think.
All right. There was another good question here. Have you guys had any discussions with the NEC yet for the national about either putting in an SSD hall, or I'm assuming we wouldn't change the national in one big flip switch over to SSD, but starting to introduce it?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I'm not going to address on this Zoom, mostly because we're actually talking about it right now. And I'm pretty sure we've got an answer and a consensus on it, but because it's not in concrete, I'm not going to go into that at this time. But we'll definitely let everybody know when it happens.
Not a problem. I have the
That's a really good question.
I think it is. Yeah, that's why I brought it forward. But I have the NEC here at my fingertips on September 8th. So whatever you're doing,
yeah,
get it taken care of by then, because I'm going to ask the same question. We'll see how
well,
they
let's put it this way, Ted. There are reasons. There are reasons that maybe you'd want to have an SSD hall, and there are also reasons we wouldn't want to have an SSD hall.
Sure.
Let's put it that way. So we're weighing everything right now, and we will do what we think is probably best. And here's the good news. This is not just, a one-man show or a two-man show or a five-man show here. We have a pretty large committee, and we have great discussions that sometimes can get a little lively, but we get things figured out. Some of you have been privy to those. So we want to make sure we're doing it right. What I like about this is there's not one person that is really like has to be the face of this. We don't want it to be that way. We want it to be a team effort where not one person gets the credit for doing all this, because that's not what this is about. This is about the activity as a whole, making it better as a whole for everybody, and having tempered checks in place, kind of like our government right now, where you need to run it through a system before you can just make a change or do something. We want to make sure it's done right so that when we're gone, people 40, 50 years from now can be using what we started very successfully. Does that make sense?
Oh, with any luck, that's the way we'd like it to happen. All right, again, a lot of the questions keep revolving right around this main central theme. Implementation is the hardest part. Writing the document that you guys have
Good.
with all of the help and the teaching and all that other stuff, the choreographic is fine, but nobody can implement that. You have to find in your way and your area how you're going to decide to have the leverage over your dancers or your area in order to make it happen. Nobody else can. What will work for Noah in his area or me in my area in New England may not work in Arkansas or wherever else you're dancing. You have different dancers, you have different variables. You have to figure this out.
We're going to hope that, yeah, and you know what else? At this point, that's kind of true, because we don't have the network in place exclusively everywhere. However, when that does happen, Ted, it should work where you are, and Wisconsin and California. I don't care where you're at. This system will work wherever you do it. So once we have those numbers going, it's going to be cool to see. Just know this, if you're a caller on this tonight and you're like, I want to do this, but I'm not quite sure how, you have you. That's the most important piece to this puzzle. And you have your intentions right. Number two, get familiar with our documents. Okay, they're free to access right now at the places Ted put in the chat before. Join our Facebook group. And then all you need is some dancers. And you can do this. You started small. And don't forget, there are people, I know so many dancers that are currently dancing, even at the advanced level, who are saying, we want to help start an SSD group that's healthy, that's sustainable. That's why we used to call it sustainable square dancing, because that's the idea we're promoting, something that sustains itself ongoing. Don't forget that some local dancers in your area may just want to help. And when they understand the bigger picture, we'll help you with that too, getting implementation. That's going to be a whole nother thing, but we'll make sure that it's not a ton of gray area where it's like, I got to figure it all out on my own. No, we want it to be like, this makes sense. And here's, step 1, step 2, step 3. And then what's left to you is the human relations part.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to let you off the hook. As I said, they all tend to start getting into more specific things about implementation. So I'm going to
that'll be for a different night.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate what he said earlier, which, well, I'll try and put a link on the video as well. But as he mentioned, there is an SSD Facebook private group that you can join. Look for that. There's got 600 members in there. So if you have specific questions about how did you get that in there, do you run this already, how is it working for you, that's the kind of place to go where you can get a lot of other feedback as opposed to where we're at right now. And
and real-time feedback and challenges people are having right now, or successes they're having right now. You can get it right there. And we have it private for a reason, so that people know it's a secure place. And it's not just like you can go in there and share everything. Nope, can't do it, because we want it to be a safe place for everybody who's trying to make this all work. Yep, I would say for sure, join that group if you haven't already, answer the questions, and we will roll. So I think we're done. I think we covered it. We're at 50 minutes. So if you're good, I think we're good. Tony, I appreciate you being available to throw your 2 cents worth in there. I think you threw at least a quarter. You threw at least 25 cents tonight.
That's about all he's got, a quarter. That looks pretty good. Hey, before I let everybody go, I just want to remind you, next week we are here again, same bat time, 8 o'clock. We have Miss Lisa Linking going to be talking about voice. We have a special guest person that she will be dealing with or instructing, so that should be fun to be here. We hope you come back. So we'll see you then. Again, Noah, we appreciate it. It was kind of last minute, but an awesome job. Thank you very much for stepping in and helping us out and doing everything that you did. We do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, we all just want it to work, so Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Ted, Tony. See you, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll look forward to the conversations as they go on in the future on the internet.
All right, everybody. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. Thank you.